very primitive ancestors when they were sort of 3 to 4 foot tall, very primitive apes, way, I mean, we're talking possibly hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years ago, and came to the earth for its resources like gold and minerals, that kind of thing, and but then decided, or through necessity possibly, were forced to use like an indigenous slave species. And that might make sense in the sense that if the Anunnaki, if their world was similar enough to ours that they breathe oxygen obviously, but maybe living on another planet with different temperatures, different gravitational pull, would make it tough to exert yourself. It's like if you lived constantly at the North Pole, then you're suddenly thrown into Texas. You're not going to acclimatise yourself too well.
Good luck with that.
It's kind of like a similar thing.
Yeah.
So one of the theories is that the Anunnaki decided to genetically alter one particular type of primitive human in Africa, and the stories that the Anunnaki chiefly were doing their work out of sort of Africa, the Middle East. That was where their base of operation.
I think they call it.
Yeah, and sort of around today, sort of Iraq, the sort of typical Middle East, areas that we all know of today, for unfortunate reasons, like Kuwait and Iran, and the story is that potentially these upgraded people, if you like, became the slave race of the Anunnaki.
Specifically to do the heavy work.
The heavy work, like mining and transportation, that kind of thing. And then over time, some of the Anunnaki actually felt that that they weren't happy about using the slave race. They actually sort of felt kind of guilty almost. And they're also, the Anunnaki was supposedly highly evolved in terms of being able to genetically mutate who knows how many number of species. And Sitchin had an interesting theory that maybe some of these stories about things like the Minotaur and the Gorgon centaurs, these fabulous beasts from the Bible, from like ancient Greek lore and
all kinds of legends.
Yes, he actually wondered if these could have been sort of freakish creations of the Anunnaki.
Experiments.
Experiments that either went right or went wrong. Who knows how you would look at it.
Because if they wanted to experiment on these little 3-foot apes, why wouldn't they experiment on a horse or a goat or a lion or a bear or something else?
Well, the story goes from there that supposedly these upgraded humans were deliberately genetically created to be sterile. So they couldn't reproduce. But then over time, because they didn't want them populating and running wildly out of control, but from there, well, if you only got a certain number and they're going to keep dying off, age 25 or 30 through exertion, didn't live that long back then, what are you going to do? So they decided to, change them again so they would be fertile. And then this early human race could continue. And then eventually, it became changed and evolved and eventually became us, or something close to us, which 30, 40, 50,000 years ago would have been like Neanderthal man and Cro-Magnon man. A lot of people have this imagery of Neanderthal man and Cro-Magnon man, and in many respects, the term that everybody knows is kind of insulting the idea of cavemen. People have this image of cavemen, dressed in a bear skin, a club in one hand, and his wife's hair in the other hand, dragging her back to the cave, that kind of thing. But in reality, both the Cro-Magnons and Neanderthal were highly evolved people. They understood death and its implications. We know that because they had extensive and detailed burial rituals. So they may have had like a belief in an afterlife or a deity. They were also very skilled artists. For example, in France, you can find some fantastic Cro-Magnon artwork on cave paintings. And I'm not exaggerating when you look at these pictures of horses and bison. They look like the sort of thing that a world famous artist would paint today. That they are that good.
They almost look like they're moving.
Yeah, they do. They're like really good. So you put all that together, they clearly, were highly advanced. Cro-Magnon man's brain was actually significantly larger than our brains today. And one of the theories is perhaps the sort of spiritual or psychic even side of their brain was more advanced than us, and possibly they developed, maybe in some respects they were far more superior to us, but in different ways.
Right.
You know, we think superior means having a faster internet connection. Superior to them might have been the ability to use ESP and psychic powers, you know, to contact each other, or in ways that we couldn't even fathom. You know, in the same way we cannot imagine what a dog's smell is like. You know, the strength of to be able to smell something, you know, 100 yards away. We just cannot think. We can't even envisage what that would be like.
Right.
Maybe it's the same with them, but things then get more mysterious because when there was this crossover time when Cro-Magnon man and the Neanderthals lived, what you had was a situation where suddenly Neanderthal man became extinct. And there's a lot of debate between archaeologists, historians, people who looked into the issue of why the Neanderthals died out. There's no real hard, fast consensus. It's, well, maybe they were sort of just taken out by the Cro-Magnons, you know, they destroyed them. Maybe they were sort of just absorbed, you know, into the growing levels of Homo sapien. And again, a controversial theory, what if they were actually genetically wiped out by extraterrestrials, by the Anunnaki, to allow for this elite lineage to continue? Now, that it's not impossible, because as sinister as it sounds, over the last 10 or 15 years or so, a lot of research has been done into what are called sort of racially profiled viruses. Now this gets into very dark areas, the idea of creating viruses that would only target one type of person. You know, you imagine if you had an African American, a Caucasian and an Asian stood next to each other, and the virus was released, whichever one it was designed and synthesized to affect, it would affect them, it would kill them, but it would,
not the others.
The other two would have no effect on them.
Oh, wow.
And we're actually researching that kind of stuff now. So if we can do that in the 21st century, you know, it's not a leap of the imagination to suggest that somebody else could have done it tens of thousands of years ago. Now, from there, this brings us further and further to sort of biblical times, you know, whether, you know, Old Testament or, you know, older accounts like the Mayans, Epic of Gilgamesh, things like that, where you've clearly got parallels between, you know, some of these biblical accounts like the flood of Noah, but then you've got like the Epic of Gilgamesh, which goes back even further, but Native American stories of flood legends, and the story from there is that possibly the Anunnaki may have been responsible for some of these stories of the ancient arks, you know, containing animals. Because if you look at it literally, you know, it'd be very difficult to sort of travel the planet grabbing 2 by 2 animals.
Really? Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just not feasible.
But a gene bank.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you find in some of these stories they talk about not taking the 2 by 2 animals on board. They talk about taking the essence of the animals on board, which actually does sound like a gene pool data bank, which would make a lot of sense. And if you've got, for example, you know, dozens of arks all around the world, if the Anunnaki knew this flood was, well, they would know, because if Nibiru was coming closer to the Earth and all this disaster was going to occur, they would be able to plan in advance.
Sure.
So why not bring to the Earth all these space arks, you know, and preserve and save as much life, human, animal base as possible.
Plant too, probably.
We plant, and take to the skies, orbit the Earth while all this calamity is going on, and then when it cools down and calms down, then you set about reseeding things.
Right.
And I actually think, you know, that's a viable argument for why there should be these flood legends. I mean, if it was just like a flood in the Middle East, you would expect only to get flood legends from the Middle East, but they're everywhere.
Right.
You know, all across the planet.
India, everywhere.
India's got them, Ireland's got them, North America's got them through the Native American law, South America, Australia, they're everywhere. So there clearly, in my mind, was a worldwide flood, or a series of floods.
Right.
And so for that reason, I think we could be like looking at the Anunnaki, preserving its elites, and then that may have a bearing on some of these stories about, you know, the sort of the men of renown in the Bible and the giants. Maybe they, like has been suggested, people like Goliath could have been part human and part Anunnaki.
An Og, especially had a 14-foot iron bed.
Yeah, because the Anunnaki were supposedly like us, but you know, giants,
Sure.
so 10, 12 feet. So it's not impossible if they were able to interbreed, you would have aspects of them and us combined. Then you have the stories about the Anunnaki supposedly being able to live massively extended lives. Not immortal, but to the point where
It looks
there's not much
immortal
difference.
to us.
Yeah, thousands of years, you know, against our 85 if you're really healthy and live on celery and lettuce and not much else, you know. And which isn't much fun, you know. So if that's the case, you know, that might explain why you have these stories a lot of people just dismiss, of like Methuselah and Noah living hundreds and hundreds of years. You know, Methuselah being the
and
eldest.
that line is supposed to go all the way back to Adam and then continue through Seth.
Yeah.
Because Abel was killed.
Yeah.
And then Cain has a whole nother line.
Yeah. So you have a lot of these stories, and then even with Adam, you know, I mean, a lot of weird stuff with Adam, for example. You know, everybody thinks of Eve as being his wife, but then you have this further story that developed that he actually was married previously to this woman named Lilith.
Lilith, yeah.
Now, Lilith is described as almost like your worst nightmare. You know, she's like Fatal Attraction gone wild kind of thing.
Very much like Frasier's Lilith.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now the story is that if you know, for people who accept all this as, no pun intended, the gospel truth, you know, we have the story of Eve being born out of Adam's rib.
Yeah.
But the story with Lilith is that God supposedly made Adam and Lilith at the same time. They didn't get along. She didn't want to be subservient, but she was like a proactive modern woman. She wanted to be equal, nothing wrong with that. Adam didn't want that. And so that marriage came to an end, and so you have different versions of what people believe. What's interesting about Lilith is that if you read the stories of Lilith, Babylonian accounts, which some of them don't talk about Lilith by name, but they're clearly referring to this malevolent female character that would sort of invade people's bedrooms at night, would steal men's sperm, would steal babies, things like this. And actually,
like a succubus?
Yeah, like a succubus. But if you read the accounts, they actually sound not dissimilar to a lot of today's alien abduction accounts.
Yes.
Where there's like the genetic component of women's eggs being taken, male sperm, DNA experiments, and you also have the issue of women saying they were pregnant and the baby was gone. They're not pregnant anymore, or they're being shown changelings.
Right.
In the fairy lore in the Middle Ages in Europe, you had stories of these little people taking human babies, replacing them with what was called a changeling. Well, today that's not much different between the little greys taking human babies and then later showing them a hybrid, an alien human hybrid.
And saying that's your child.
Yeah, and Lilith actually sounds almost like an ancient description of an alien abductor.
Right.
So the fact that we can tie Lilith right back to Adam, and also, even if the people who accept the Adam and Eve story, you have this issue of when Eve was made out of Adam's rib, it talks about how God placed Adam into this state of deep sleep. Any fool, anyone would realise they're talking about he was anaesthetised.
Sure.
And even if it wasn't Adam, if it was like, something speculate, could Adam and Eve actually be a race of people, or could they have been like the male and the female of a species rather than just one person, one man and one woman? So what this suggests to me is some sort of genetic manipulation, possibly to create and refine, hopefully from their perspective, perfect humans. Maybe it all went wrong with the floods and things like this. But then from there, we have this scenario of the earth being plunged into turmoil with the floods and all these disasters. Stories maybe the Anunnaki then left, or the bulk of them left, and what was left behind was almost like a caretaker type body to continue the research and the investigations and the manipulation of the human species.
Like a research assistant.
Like a research assistant, but also kind of like ruling the earth by proxy. Not where you have this, like in the previous millennia, however many millennia, where the Anunnaki ruled the planet.
Right.
But if they'd gone, well, how do we effectively still rule the earth or manipulate the people? Well, you put a splinter groups around the planet, caretaker groups, and you start infiltrating the species and changing it, creating more and more RH negatives, which could even have been, who knows, that could have been the Anunnaki bloodline.
Or they could have somehow removed that RH factor
they could
from the indigenous species.
Yeah, they could, yeah. And from there, we have a situation where, as I said, by proxy, if you like, they're still ruling.
Right.
Because there are a lot of, accounts of, like the British royal family has a higher percentage than normal of RH negatives. You have also, a number of US presidents, people of influence. Even people who've influenced US history, like one of the most famous and notorious RH negatives was Lee Harvey Oswald, changed the face of the US presidency.
Right.
So I sort of take the view that maybe these stories of like the incubus, the succubus, the little people, the wee folk as they were known in the Middle Ages, 15th, 16th centuries in Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales, taking babies. They would take men to the fairy kingdom, and they'd find out when they got back home, like 3 days had gone by instead of 2 hours. They thought it was 2 hours. That's like missing time today in abduction. So I think all these legends, like I said, of the incubus, the succubus, Babylonian demons, stealing men's sperm, this kind of thing in the ancient past, I think this is essentially like a distorted folklore based on what is probably more like a scientific series of experimentations.
Involving abduction.
Involving abductions, but with a genetic angle at the heart of it all, that is connected with the whole issue of RH negatives. And the further and further we come to the present day, then we see a resurgence. Well, not so much a resurgence, we see the whole RH angle become more visible because people are looking into it. For example, in the American Civil War, a lot of the troops who were critically injured died not from the wounds, but because, we knew enough at that time that you got to have blood in your system, so they pumped blood into people, and sometimes it worked perfect because they got the right blood. Sometimes the person would go into shock, not because necessarily the wounds, but because they'd just been given 2 pints of the wrong blood.
Wow. And
so it was trial and error. And initially, like when the Civil War was on, there wasn't a full understanding of why people would die sometimes when they were given blood and other times they wouldn't. It was only when finally we understood that there were different blood groups, and whatever you do, don't mix them, that we then began to realise that there weren't just different blood groups, A, B, that a small percentage of the population was negative, was RH negative. Now, that in itself is interesting, because it's just a small percentage of the population is different. But in some respects they're really different. For example, if you have an RH negative woman who's pregnant by an RH positive man, the woman's body actually reacts as if the baby is, for all intents and purposes, alien. I wouldn't say extraterrestrial.
It's like a giant virus.
Yeah, it's like
antibodies.
Alien, it's like alien in the sense that it shouldn't be there.
Right.
And the mother's body actually tries to literally kill the baby.
Right.
And in years gone by, it would do that.
Right.
And today, fortunately, we have medicines that can combat this, where it overcomes the ability of the mother to do this, and the baby develops fine.
Right.
Now, if you got 2 RH negative, mother and father, there's no issue.
Problem.
No. But you have to be very, very careful. That's why tests are always done to make sure if it's not already known ahead. You have other issues as well. For example, there are a high percentage than normal of people who are RH negative who have an extra vertebra in the back. Others have what is like a vestigial tail. In some cases it actually is almost like a vestigial tail. Other times it's just like an appendage of muscle that you can't flick it around or anything like that. It just hangs, and so we
And
don't
it's
hear.
removed.
Yeah, we don't hear about it as much as actually happens.
Sure.
They just snip it off.
Sure.
It's just one of those things, kind of like today where somebody's born with their toes or their fingers fused together. That happens quite a lot. It's not, but we have ways to combat it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, we have physical issues. Now, a lot of people who've sort of gravitated towards the UFO subject, they find that they are Rh negative, and
proportionally, there are more people that are negative, Rh negative.
Yeah. Now, I think to a degree you could make an argument. Well, maybe people who think that they might be Rh negative decide to check, and so maybe a lot of people don't check, and so we don't get those results. But on the other hand, there are a lot of anomalies. Probably the two most famous abductees ever were Betty and Barney Hill. Now, I wasn't able to find out what their blood groups were. They had this abduction experience in 1961.
They're the poster children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, coming back from vacation late at night, saw this object, had these vague memories later that something happened, and started having these bizarre nightmares, etc., etc., etc. And now I mentioned how that some Rh negatives are born with an extra vertebra. Well, although I wasn't able to find out what their blood groups were, one of the interesting things that Barney said when he was placed under hypnosis and also interviewed, he said that the aliens ran their fingertips down his spine several times and really slowly, and he felt that they were actually counting how many vertebrae he got. So that sort of ties in.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned how there's a high percentage of people who are Rh negative in Finland. Well, one of the other most famous abductees, Betty Andreasen, she's of Finnish extraction. And I also found a number of cases where a high percentage of Rh negative people in the Gaelic populations, and also found a number of cases where people, particularly in the 50s and 60s, had met alleged alien creatures that gave their names, which were actually sort of derivations on ancient Gaelic terms. So
I'd never heard of that.
There's some really
that's interesting.
Yeah, some really interesting ones. There's a famous one, a guy named Truman Bethram, who claimed to have met this beautiful alien woman named Aura Raines, and his story does sound a little bit unbelievable. It's sort of
Might have
almost
had a pint or two.
Yeah, it's almost like a Romeo and Juliet type story, sort of a Earthman meets Space Girl, and a lot of people dismiss it. But Aura Raines, and I really don't think he knew this, is actually almost identical to an ancient Gaelic term, which it basically sort of revolves around the idea of like some sort of fantastic ethereal light. And there are a number of other examples like this. For example, one of George Adamski's alleged alien contacts, he also shared like an ancient Gaelic term as well. So you have things like this, and I've investigated a number of cases, which I talk about in the book as well, where people have been abducted, then have what are called MILABs, military abductions, where it's as if there's like a clandestine military agency, possibly that operates outside of even the regular government, like a splinter group that maybe even the elected government doesn't know about, but like it's like a private army that abducts and monitors abductees with like black helicopters, phone monitoring, that kind of thing. And a number of abductees have said they've been sort of follow-up abductions, not by the aliens, but by the military. And they've been asked questions about their blood, what blood group are you, or they've taken blood and studied the blood, as if somebody is trying to get a handle on how many abductees are Rh negative, is the number growing? And this sort of has given rise to some controversial scenarios of what if this infiltration is increasing. Now, I'm not saying that people who are Rh negative are sort of sinister sleepers, because most people probably don't even know they're Rh negative. It's not like they're working for the aliens and hiding it from all the rest of us. But again, could it be something like a ruling by proxy, where they're trying to, bit by bit, the Rh negatives have become more prevalent in royalty, or in world leaders? Could this be a way of sort of subtly controlling the herd being us.
Stacking the deck at
Yes,
least.
yeah. And so that essentially is the theme of the book, going right back to hundreds of thousands of years ago in what today is Africa, through to the Anunnaki, through possibly the refinement of people or entities that became known as Adam and Eve, and the floods, and Lilith, and the latter-day stuff of incubus, succubus, through to the genetic manipulation today. And the theme running through all this, the Rh negative blood factor and what it potentially means and implies. And I hope when people read the book that they have an open mind, because it's, as I said, nobody's done a book on it before. There've been articles here and there, but nobody's sort of combined it all together to try and come up with a reasonable scenario that might explain why the Basques were Rh negative, why the Cro-Magnons may have developed like they did, why we have all these stories coming out of the Middle East from thousands of years ago, the gods coming down, and why and how that might also tie in with why the military today wants to know what abductees' blood groups are. It's like an ongoing thing, a hidden secret, like an undercurrent that most people don't know about. And I suspect, from what we know about the government investigations, they don't really know. They know something's going on, and they're trying to figure out why this refinement of the bloodline is going on and what it all means.
Well, any time you have a statistical outlier, I mean, that's odd enough in itself, but statistically you'd say, oh, that's just an outlier. But if all of a sudden that small area of the normal curve turns into a little bump of its own, and it gets bigger and bigger, and now you've got two populations. It's not just an outlier. This is another normal distribution, and there's the rest of the guys. That is something to study.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's lots, I'm sure there's lots of ways that this story could go in directions we still haven't even thought of, and that may come more to the forefront as we learn more about all this. That we'll see different aspects, and why is it abductees and contactees? Is it more abductees than more contactees? What's the purpose of the hybrid offspring? There are admittedly a lot of sinister stories about these hybrids where people have claimed to have seen them sort of walking down the street in sort of long coats, turn-up collars, sunglasses, hats pulled down, and then when they get close, it kind of looks not like a person, or if they're trying to move amongst us, through daylight and night time, but they're being very careful. There are a lot of stories about where people have said they've seen the greys. This gets down a really bizarre path, but they said they've seen the greys on a UFO in a building, and they've abductees, and they've started putting on like wigs, and dresses and sunglasses.
Oh my goodness!
And like looking really creepy and weird, as if they're trying to figure out if they can pass amongst us. And of course, if you're refining the hybrids bit by bit, so that they gradually become more and more like us, then who knows what you're dealing with. I mean, some people have said that some of these hybrids look very close to us, but they have like where you look at a person, you can't tell their age, almost as if they've been over Botoxed or something. You imagine an 80-year-old person with the skin of a 25-year-old. It would, they wouldn't look young.
Something that sets off your little meter.
An 80-year-old person wouldn't look like a young person.
Right.
They just look weird with young skin. And that's what people said about the hybrids, that they can't. People cannot tell how old they are.
As if they can't age.
As if they can't age, or there's something that doesn't look right in terms of their age, how they look, versus their skin texture, that it's just
interesting
off somehow. So there's a lot of aspects to it that I think are still under investigated. But as I said, I hope that what the book will do will open people's eyes to an aspect of the UFO phenomenon that most people aren't aware of, because it's sort of gone under the radar.
Yeah.
People who investigate abductions, for example, get the information, the data from the witness, what happened, where did they take it, what did they look like. Most people don't think, well, what's your blood type? Then they compare it to somebody else's blood type. No. So I think that's why the story's been hidden. And also, one of the more interesting things is that because a lot of people are Rh negative and drawn to the subject, does that mean they're being manipulated to become part of the subject? And I don't think it's potentially coincidental that, for example, Eric von Daniken is Rh negative, Brad Steiger's Rh negative. Both of them have written multiple books on the whole ancient astronaut scenario.
Amazing.
You know, Eric's certainly the most famous, but Brad's done, you know, a large amount of books on, very good books on, you know, mysteries of the ancient past.
We need to check on Whitley Strieber.
And well, yeah, and I mean, you know, Robert Anton Wilson, you know,
Right.
who extensively wrote on anomalies, he was Rh negative. You know, maybe we should all get checked out to see how many of us are Rh negative. But so you put it all together, there's a mystery.
Yeah.
And I think I've sort of opened the door to the mystery, studied it extensively, written about it, and hopefully, you know, we can now go and see where it's going to lead from here. So.
Yeah, you've posed some very titillating possibilities. And I have read about the Rh negative factor. There's only a couple of websites that really do much with it. And my impression was that they're regurgitating the very same information
Yeah.
from each other, and it doesn't go very deeply.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people who've written about it, you can find a lot of articles on the internet. It tends to be, for the most part, about the physical differences or the, you know, the ways it can affect like a baby and things
Right.
like this. It tends to be the same issues, but as I said, what I pointed out is to look into, you know, different parts of the world where you have high percentages. Why do we have high percentages there?
And the link to the Cro-Magnon.
Links to the Cro-Magnons and the Basque people.
Right.
And then, you know, the links to things like, for example, the MILABs with the military saying, you, what blood group are you?
I'd never heard that before.
Barney Hill's spine, you know, being
That's
counted,
amazing.
which is bizarre. But again, people probably wouldn't think of that if they
No.
weren't aware of the, you know, the sort of subtle issues that the Rh negative thing brings together with the spinal cord. So it's things like this that's, you know, haven't really been delved into deeply in terms of articles or books, but
Right.
you know, maybe now it'll sort of
Maybe
make
it'll
people
kickstart
think.
something.
Yeah, I would hope so. Yeah, I mean, there's no point writing a book if it's not going to hopefully achieve something.
Right.
You know,
Should lead to something.
yeah, that's what I hope the book will do. Is sort of open the door to more work on this
Right.
and more research and finding more cases that parallel some of the other ones and give us paint a bigger picture of what's going on. So,
I can't wait for it to come out.
well, I'll make sure you get a copy.